What's the first thing you do when you open up Unity or Unreal? You create or open a project. And that's exactly what we're doing today in our game engine. I think this is very exciting because currently, if you look, all of our assets for the example game we're building live in our editor. That doesn't make sense because we don't ship the editor with the game assets. We have the game in its own folder somewhere else, and then the editor just knows where that is and can grab the assets from the game. But how does it do that? Well, we're gonna have this very simple thing called a project file, where within this project file, it's just gonna be simple JSON, and it's gonna be like, this is where our assets directory is, this is where our scenes directory is, and things like that. So it just contains metadata about your game or your project, and then it allows something like our asset manager to just know where to look. I think this is very exciting, personally. I think because this is the real first step we're taking towards decoupling our editor and a game. So over time, we're going to keep on working towards this. Like eventually scenes will be serialized and in their own JSON format, eventually binary format. And the last thing before we get into the code is just, I know if you've been following the series, last episode, we weren't able to have it running, or editor running. By the end of the episode, it's going to be back and running. And we also had to disable asset cooking. And that's because we needed project files. So then by the end of this episode, we'll also have our assets automatically cooked again. And again, the assets will be cooked in that like game directory, example game, and completely out of the editor. So if you're excited, let's just jump into the code. Okay, let's jump right into project files. So again, they're very cool. They just allow us to basically provide metadata about the whole project. And now it's going to let us abstract out, at least for now, all the assets of a project, of a game, into its own folder file structure. We can point our game engine to open the project. And just like, you know how you open Unity and Unreal, it's like open your project. That's what this is. So let's get into it. So first we're going to need a project folder, and let's also call project.zig. And let's open that up. This is going to be pretty dead simple, really, because we're going to have std and zimp, and that's going to be it. And then we'll create our project struct. And again, most of this is defined in Zimp itself, zimp.project manifest. And to actually get IntelliSense, let's go over to root. And we're just going to kind of add the ones we want right now. It's just going to be 3. It's going to be project manifest, getting the project itself, and open project, which we're going to write immediately after. So let's head back into our project. And now project manifest. There we go. And then we also need a root directory. So like, where are we opening it from? And now we're going to have, let's just write our deinit project allocator, std allocator, and then IO. Then self.manifest.deinit allocator and self.router.close. There we go. And then we're going to have 2 things. Remember how our assets don't cook right now? Well, we need the ability to start cooking assets again. And our project, well, the project knows where the assets are. So that's kind of going to be our entry point. And we're going to call it watch assets, because I also implemented auto recooking when assets change. So we'll see that in action right at the end of the episode. And allocator and IO. In this case, don't want that, but it's going to give us a watch handle. Nice. And then it's just going to be simp, watch handle, start, take our allocator, IO, manifest, router. Then there'll be some options that we don't need, and a callback, which we don't need to define right now. And then we'll also need to be able to stop watching for cleanup. And then just handle that stop. And that's our project struct. Like I said, very simple, right? So we're going to need 2 things. One, we need to be able to open a project and create a project. Well, creating a project is actually going to live in our editor, because that's almost like editor specific things we're going to be able to create in the editor. But opening, we need to be able to do that in any game. So let's make a new file, open.zig, and get into it. Let's do std and zimp again. Okay, and then the thing we'll need is project manifest, zimp.project manifest, and then project itself equals what we just defined, project. So now we'll need some simple options, open project options, and it's just going to be root path for now. And then if we want other things, like maybe we want to open a project but don't actually watch for assets, we can add that in here. But for now, we're keeping it simple. Allocator, IO, and project options, then creates the project. And now simp.path is absolute. We will, for now, just only accept absolute paths. Oops, let's call this ops, make it a little easier. And then return error.project root must be absolute. And again, if you want to be able to parse relative stuff, go for it. You can make it as crazy as you want here, but we're just keeping it simple. Dot open dir absolute IO ops root path, and then nothing else there. And then just in case there's some errors, we error defer. Now we will try and actually create it. Dot load from dir allocator IO root dir, and then manifest. Oh, need one more input. Manifest mod equals zimp dot project dot manifest. There we go. And it's 1 sec. Manifest mod dot default manifest path. And then we can just return that. Dot manifest equals manifest root dir equals root dir. And this one can actually be a const. Okay. And now that's all we've written. So now we actually need to be able to use it. And one nice thing is asset roots we're actually going to be able to get rid of because we're going to now have project. So let's see here. So it's going to be project slash project.zig and project there. Now let's head over here. So it's no longer going to take a project, but instead it's going to take, or I'm sorry, it's going to take a project instead of asset roots. And same with our asset manager. No more asset roots. We're going to be getting rid of it. And we'll just pass in the project. So then let's go over here. And like I said, it's going to take a project instead and asset roots. Get rid of that. It's not coming from there, but instead project, project, project. And we can actually just fully get rid of it. So asset roots there, asset roots, no more use for that. But now let's go back to where we're using project. So first we'll have dir, try stdio.dir, open dir, so project.root dir, IO, then project manifest cooked asset paths. So that's one of the things that provides us. Again, let's kind of just look at this a little bit better. Just do a quick error defer cooked.close. Right. So now this project, it defines where our cooked assets are. So now we know where we can look for that. And now create source, instead of being from root, it's going to be from a directory. So cooked dir. So now we go over to create source. And now instead of root, it's actually going to take a directory. And now source pointer is going to be init from dir. And it's going to take that directory. Okay, and I believe that should be everything in here. Let's just do a quick check. And that initial check looks good. So let's head over to our editor. So like I said, the editor is what's going to allow us to create our actual project. So you're going to create the CLI folder, and then I'm just going to call it root.zig. You can call it whatever you want. Paste it in just to save some time here. So what do we need? So we're going to have options. So where's the root path? Are we creating the project? Which, yes, for the create. Otherwise, there'll be two. There'll be create and open, and then project name, which is optional. So you can see create and open, and then the next arg will be the actual absolute path. And then if create is just very simple, again, this could definitely be cleaner. Here's another absolute check for us, and then create project. Okay, what do we do? So we have that project manifest. We're creating an ID, and we're using the name, and then we're just creating the directories. So we have generated dir, assets dir, scenes dir, cooked dir. So we'll see exactly what this looks like right away. And then just some logging. Okay, let's head back over to main and hook this up. So CLI equals import CLI root.zig. And now let's actually do some stuff. So args equals try init minimal args to slice init arena allocator. Then options equals CLI dot parse args catch the error log error invalid editor arguments, and we'll pass in the error and return early if there's a mistake. So now we're going to use that kind of helper function to get the absolute project root. CLI absolute project root net.gpa net.io options.root path and defer init gpa free project root. And now if options.create project, we'll do that CLI dot create project, right? So net.gpa, net.io, it's the exact same thing. So we pass in all the data. Otherwise, we can assume that we're opening a project. So var project equals try zp open project. Which I think I need to do a little LSP restart. Open project, net.gpa, net.io, and then dot root path equals project root. And then defer project.dinit, not project root, but project init.gpa and net.io. And we're almost done. But remember, we said we have to cook files, the watch handle equals try project watch assets, net.gpa and net.io, and defer project stop watching assets, and we'll take that watch handle. And now we just have to wait for the initial cook, catch the error, log error, initial asset cook failed, pass the error, and then return. Now we've basically done everything, but remember we don't use asset roots anymore instead of a project. So we'll have to pass project into the application init, and that should be all the code. So let's first of all try to compile and see if we made any mistakes. So there's gonna be a little something. I think this needs to be a pointer, and then this would also have to be a pointer. This should be root, and then const28. So create source. Then I did mess that up. Okay. Should be allocator. Yes. So then it should be project.manifest.cooked assets path. There we go. That makes more sense. Okay. So now we can build it. So what do we need to do? Well, the very first thing we're going to do is create a new directory. So I'm going to go just one below and make dir, let's just call it example game. Let's, in a new directory, let's go into example game. And then let's just go back to Zephyr editor. And now zig build run -- create. And now let's go into example game. Okay, so we're in here. So let's just see there's nothing in here. Now let's run it. And just need a space there. There we go. So now if we do an ls.a, look, we create that assets, scenes, and .zephyr file. We look inside of Zephyr, we have everything in here. Let's just open it up. And this is the main thing. So this is the project file that we just generated. So that's the format, the name needs an ID, and then this is where everything's going to look and live. So now this defines where assets live, right? So let's put things in there. Right now, all of our assets, if you look here, they're all right in here. But we'd want it to be outside. We want to be in here. So what am I going to do is I'm going to go into our editor, assets. I'm going to take all of these, and then I'm going to put them in here. So now we can see everything's in here, and we go into our editor. There's nothing else. Because those were all assets for the game, right? And now they're in our game folder. They're no longer in our editor. So we have completely decoupled assets from our editor, which is very cool. So now let's try and open this. Again, something could have gone wrong. Okay, it looks like there was potentially a bug here and a no material key, but let's see. It's still cooking everything else, so I might have made a mistake last episode, but we will see. Okay, and then we see it finished, but then one of them failed. So what I'm gonna do, go in here. I think it's because this one wasn't updated. That's probably a bug inside of Zimp where I need to fix that. But let's just make that the correct one. And let's try running it again. Okay, there we go. So it's back up and running. Again, the same monkey, everything. It's running again. But what's awesome is our assets, again, they're no longer here. We still have our font for our editor, but that's now, it makes sense. It's an asset for the editor, not an asset for a game. All the game assets now live inside this example game. And eventually our scenes will live in here. All our gameplay logic will live in here. But this is very exciting because, again, we've completely decoupled assets from editor. I hope you enjoyed the video. Personally, I think this is probably one of the coolest things we've done in the series so far. I know to some may not be as exciting, but personally, I think it really is. Like I said, it's a much better architecture. It's cleaner. We're finally getting some separation of game and the game editor or Zephyr editor. So yeah, again, I think that's really cool. If you want to see this taken a step further with scenes and like scenes being serialized in an example game, there's some repos down in the description. You know, it's the same ones we're working on, but because I'm working on the game engine way ahead, I've done a lot more work. So if you want to go check that out and see what that looks like, go look. All the links are down in the description. And if you want to chat about it, the Discord link's also down in the description. So come say hi, come chat. Any questions, happy to answer. And that's all I had. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe. All those things really, really help the video. And if you made this far, just want to say thank you and hope you have a great day.